All right, so the purpose of this meeting is to showcase the VoterClick software. And there's a couple parts of it that I'll go into, but what's important to understand is this is two things. First of all, it's not a new software. I started using this in my own precinct back in 2010. It's been updated and improved every cycle since then. I have a software company, and so when I have programmers that don't have a project to work on, or if I have people that need to have some training, I give them a task to do on this project. So gradually over time, it's built up into literally thousands of hours of programming that have gone into this project. So it's not new, and it's not something that was done in somebody's basement. It's a professional product, and it has support and all those kinds of things. When I say it's not new, in 2014, the state used it statewide in every county. I think except for, what's the county that only has like 5 people in it? Granite or something. They didn't use it. They just, they wrote all their delegates down on a sheet of paper and faxed it in, I believe. But it was used by the statewide in 2014. Currently, it's being used by Davis County and also by Weber County. Last year or 2 years ago, I think it was, 2 cycles ago, which was 6 years ago, it was used by Salt Lake County for their precincts. They were going to use it again in 2020, but we didn't have anything in 2020, so here we are. There's a voting app as part of it. Which is the county that, Emory County. Emory County has used the voting app at their county convention every year for the last 5 years. The voting part of it was used in some precincts in the past. I've used it in my precinct mostly, but it's also used by, because as you probably know, I'm a professional parliamentarian. And my voting app has been used in meetings in several different states, up to 600 people. So it has lots of experience. So it's something that's been around, and something that, as I said, we update and modify every year. So there are different parts of the VoterClick system, and it starts with before the caucus, caucus night, and after the caucus. And the entire purpose of the system, which, by the way, all the other counties pay for this, but I as long as I'm treasurer, I don't really feel right about charging Utah County for something. So it's a freebie for Utah County, but all the other counties pay to use this. But the whole purpose I started this is because I've been a precinct chair. I hate to admit it. I've been a precinct chair or vice chair now for 30 years. And I have been to some precinct meetings that absolutely were terrible. I remember a precinct meeting where, because I work hard to get people to come to my meeting. I have 150, 200, 250 people come to my meeting, depending on the presidential election. I put a notice on every door, but I had one year with 250 people where we didn't finish counting the ballots until midnight. I mean, because we had a lot of people to elect. We're a pretty large precinct. We gave up at midnight, and we just said, look, all the ballot counters, we'll stay here and finish. You all go home, and we'll post the results or something. It was a terrible, terrible meeting. And after that, I said, well, we've got to do something that makes the caucus meeting more enjoyable, and that and provides a better result, better attendance, or we're going to lose the caucus system. So the whole purpose of this system is to strengthen and preserve the caucus system. So the first part of it is before the caucus. We're trying to get people to participate before the caucus. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So this website, the URL is utahcaucus.gop. And this is a website that we could advertise to people to help them prepare for the caucus. Different things that you can do on this website is you can file for as a candidate for office. So if you remember several years ago, the State Central Committee created the idea of a same-day ballot In other words, we want to help people to participate by allowing people to file for precinct chair or other precinct office in advance. And then we could, for people who can't attend the caucus, we could print a ballot where they could participate. This was the whole thing in response to Count My Vote. It's still in the state rules, but the state has not provided a technology to do that, except for this system in 2014. This is how we did that. This website allows you to pre-register for your caucus, and we'll see in just a minute why that's useful and important. You can look and see the candidates who are running, and you can also register to vote. You can find your caucus. So let's do that one. Probably lots of people are going to want to find their caucus this year. So we have a couple ways of doing it. And the first one is if you know your precinct number, then you can put it in here. Most people are not going to this year. So we do have a way of looking up your precinct. If you don't know your precinct, you click there. And it will just ask you a couple things like your name and your house number and your zip code, and it will help you find your precinct. And then when you get that, oops, sorry. Yeah, my mistake. I fat fingered it.
Kirby, will that be updated with the new precincts?
Yes, of course. Yeah, we need to get the list from the county, and then we can update it. And so it will show, because we will have loaded this information into the system already, what precinct you're in, where's your caucus location, what room in that building it's going to be, who the host is, who, the phone number, everything that you need to know to get to your correct precinct meeting. So, so that's something that we can easily advertise, and it's a very simple URL to advertise, utahcaucus.gop. We can get people to go to this website, and then it helps them find their caucus. We can also add information here. Go ahead, Sharon, what's your question?
So two questions. One, you need to update, obviously you're going to update some things, but notice that the caucus night date is wrong.
Yeah, the dates are all 4 years
okay
ago. Yeah.
But is this when we talked about in our last meeting about having a QR code? Is this where it's going to take people, or is there another site that they're talking about?
I'm not sure we have the QR code thing narrowed down, but the QR code could absolutely, Mac might have had a different idea about the QR code, but the QR code could definitely be used with this. So that's definitely a possible technology. Good question.
Doing that, I would hope it would go straight to that page of Find My Caucus.
Yes, obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, clearly. So we also have a way to pre-register, and then a way to get the same day ballot, and a way to file as a candidate. So let me see if I can go over here to this. And
everything just has to be very, very simple and self-explanatory. So if I go to this Find Your Neighborhood Caucus and elections to pre-register, it's going to ask me to provide some basic information. The reason for this is the rule that the executive committee had was people can only go to their own website information. So let's just put in some voter information here, and then click on continue. And we have this here. Also click that you certify you are the correct voter, also because the rule is that you're only supposed to be able to see your own information. Now, once somebody has entered their information, it asks for a email and a password. And you can't go ahead and go back into it unless you supply that. So that's the case here. Let me go back and enter someone brand new so that we can see what that looks like and how that works. So I'm trying to think of who hasn't been put in yet. I keep using my my own family members over and over again. They probably don't appreciate it. And hope no one's going to steal all of our birthday information. However, gifts are appreciated at birthday time. There we go. So this is what the normal person would encounter if they already have, as a voter, already have an email and a phone number in the system. It will bring that up and pre-populate it. So that would include people who have been caucus attenders in the past and have given us this information, or delegates we would already have the information for. If your information is already in the system, you have it here, and you can decide to enter it or edit it. We are allowing people to create a password if they would like to. This protects anyone else from going in and editing their information. That's what I just showed you a screen ago, is what happens if you are password protected, then you have to enter that. To pre-register, you are required to provide an email address and a phone number. So one of the functions of the pre-registration system is to get contact information for our party members. So once I go ahead and update this, in this case I'm not going to specify a password, this is what is provided. This is the pre-registration ticket. This is the ticket that a person can print out and take with them to the caucus meeting and be able to walk in and show this ticket and their ID to an ID checker and not have to sign in. If someone has this ticket at the caucus, I'm simply going to take their ID, I'm going to match up their name with the ID right here. I'm going to match up the picture on the ID with the person. I'm going to look and see what party and precinct they're in. If they're in a different precinct, I'm going to send them away, and if they're in my precinct, fine. And then if they're Republican or Democrat or unaffiliated, that tells me what sort of voting credential or voting authority that person has. Obviously, only Republicans can run for office, etc. You have at this point the option to download this as a PDF or to print it right from your screen. If you download it as a PDF, you can print it later, obviously. So that's the advantage of that. So the whole purpose of the pre-registration system is to get people's contact information in a way that, and identify them in a way that speeds up the check-in process. At the end, I'll give you a link to a training video that shows how this pre-registration ticket would be used at the check-in. So that covers this: find the neighborhood caucus elections and pre-register to attend. If somebody doesn't know where their caucus elections are, you notice that the ticket has the date, has the address of the caucus, it tells the room, and there's also a note there to see the party website for any last-minute changes. So this is one reason why we've asked all the counties to provide this information for all of the precincts. What is the location of the precinct caucus, so that this information can be shown on the pre-registration ticket. So if there's any questions about that functionality so far, please go ahead and raise your hand and I'll cover those. Hopefully this is all very straightforward. You know, if it's very confusing, then it's not going to work for the general public as well. See who is running to represent you in the neighborhood caucus elections. Here we don't require the individual to identify if they already know their county and their precinct. Now, the precinct identifier is where we have seen some problems with testing, because in some counties, they spell out the whole name. For example, Orem 24. But we go by the precinct identifier that's used in the state system, the Lieutenant Governor system, which is Orem 24 or OR 24. So we have this button here. If you don't know your precinct, you can fill in some basic information to get it. Let me just show you. It's pretty simple, actually. It's just your last name, zip code, and house number. So it's extremely easy to look up your precinct. I'm just going to do it that way to show how that is. My house number, and it gives me the choices. Generally, this list will be only people who live in your same household, but I'm just going to pick myself. And now I can see the list of everybody who's running. So these are the races. This information comes from the county. So each county is giving me a spreadsheet to upload to the system that tells what races are being elected. The duties are shown so that whether I'm fighting for office or I'm voting, I can understand what a precinct chair actually does. And again, this information comes from each county and is customizable for each county. Over here on the right-hand side are the listing of the candidates who are running. So it doesn't show here, but let's take, for example, the county delegate. There's 2 people running there. You have the name and the contact information, the phone number, and that little box underneath would be if the candidate had put any information. And you'll see this in a second. The candidate can list biographical information. They have a website they can list. If any of that information was provided by the candidate, it would show up there. In this case, for test purposes, it's not. So it's not showing up. But this allows anyone to go in and see who's running the precinct. Now, Noel, is it Noel Knighton? I'll unmute you so you can ask your question. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just on that pre-registration page, we've given you some building locations, but we haven't given you the room numbers on our form, that the spreadsheet you wanted to upload. Can we get that information and have you upload it next week? How hard is it to make changes to that?
I'll skip that.
It is the full ballot.
So this is the, let me pause this.
The rule is that you're
So remember
supposed to take
the same day ballot. This is the ballot that you can print out to go to your precinct, that you can actually send with someone to vote for you or to cast your ballot for you with a copy of your ID. Yes, Sharon?
Unmute there. And some of the things you've already done. So one question I had is, you said that they could download that page as a PDF or whatever. Is it possible for them to somehow do it as a screenshot so they can just show their phone? Or is that not an option yet?
Yeah, keep listening, and your question will be answered.
Okay. And then another question, when you were searching for what's my precinct, when you were trying to look up who's registered in my precinct, you went through it pretty quick and I couldn't tell. You said that it should list people in your same household. So I didn't notice if you had a name listed. I saw house number and I saw zip code.
Oh, yeah. So it asks you for your last name, your zip code, and your house number.
Okay.
And that's
because Marion and I have the same. Marion and I obviously are in the same zip code. We have the same house number. We don't live in the same street. So
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what separates it. And the tests I've done is that it's pretty good at narrowing it right down to usually one family.
Okay.
Okay. Good questions.
Thank you.
To your caucus meeting and post it. So it shows the instructions. This tells the voter how to take this ballot, what you're supposed to do, put it in a sealed envelope, blah, 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 make a copy of your photo ID, give it to someone, and then this is where they can vote. So you notice that the instructions are for the number 2 on the instructions is to rank the candidates for each office. Actually, yeah, for each race. Okay, good. So this is to provide for those precincts who want to use preferential voting or IRV voting. If you're not using IRV voting, then you can just take whatever they list as number 1 as their first choice. There's not much value to a pre-voted ballot if you're not using preferential voting, because you can only use their number 1 choice every time.
So you see up here where it says security code. Each time a ballot is created, it is assigned a unique number because it can only be created by that voter. And then the chair before the meeting can get a list of those of the security code of the ballots that have been issued or printed in that precinct. And then when the ballots are brought in, the chair can check those off the list, each by unique number, and that prevents voter fraud. That prevents people from taking this ballot and copying it or doing whatever, and then using other people's identification. So the this ballot, you can't see the top of it, but it has the identification of the person who cast the vote. And then the person who brings the ballot in is supposed to bring in a copy of the government issued ID. So that is kind of the before the caucus advantages of the system. It helps people to prepare. It helps people to participate by using the same day ballot, and it helps people to identify their precinct and help them to find ways to better participate. Any questions on that, the pre-caucus part of it so far? Okay.
I'm guessing that's a page that we'll be able to go to unprint, and you have 2 raised hands.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, yes. I'm looking at the presentation and not seeing the raised hands, so that's good. Ben, please.
Well, it has to do with ballots, but it's not pre-caucus. I'm just wondering, I might be having your system confused with another, but I thought you had before where those that pre-register to run for precinct officers and delegates, that a ballot could then be printed out, and that's a ballot you can use at your caucus.
Yes, yeah, you can, and that's called the sample same day ballot. So
Okay.
you can basically, the precinct chair can print that out and then use that as the ballot for the meeting. That's correct. Becky, how have you been? Haven't talked to you in ages.
I know, right? Yeah, I've been doing well, thank you. Yeah, this is exciting. I'm happy to see this and happy to be a part of it. Just one question on this one. So the unique security code is only for the same day ballot, is that right? So
Correct.
we're not going
That's
to have
correct.
that for any others. Okay. And then I had one other question. What was it? The sample same day ballot. Well, you're calling these same day ballots, but there's not going to be any type of anything other than a same day ballot, right?
Correct. And I call it the same day ballot because that's how it's referred to in the bylaws of the Utah State Republican Party.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Wendy.
Hey, so my question is, what about people who are not registered and can't find themselves on there because they can register and affiliate, right?
They can. They absolutely can. At the caucus meeting, they can bring in their affiliation. That's very true. But
Okay,
obviously
so-
they can't.
But they wouldn't be
can't-
able to do it beforehand, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Yep.
Okay, cool.
All right. So now we get to caucus day. And the caucus day, the first issue with the caucus meeting is the horrible line of people out the door waiting to register. That's the first thing I observed is, I went to a caucus meeting where it was an hour-long line to get in and get into the meeting. Well, that's terrible. That's a terrible experience. Nobody's going to want to do that year after year. And then the ballot counting is the second thing that's really an issue. Now, I have to say that the biggest problem with having the long line is you can't start the voting until everybody's been checked in. And so you drag the meeting out, and then, and because people can't hear, you can't even start the election process. So, so I have to say that in my precinct, the last 4 cycles, we have finished our precinct meeting, and we, of course, we elect the chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer. We generally elect 7 or 9 county delegates and 4 or 5 state delegates. So we have a lot of elections, and we finish and we're home by 9, or we leave by 9 p.m. Okay, we have a 2-hour caucus meeting, and which I have to confess has made me a very popular precinct chair. But let's talk about how that happens. So let's see, I need to go over to another video. What I'm going to show here is sorry, just a second. I've got to navigate quickly. Where's my library? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how these tools will help us to shorten lines checking in. And VoterClick, the system, provides for paper check-in sheets, but it has some information there that makes it very easy to enter the data afterwards. The whole purpose of checking people in, as you'll hear, is to get contact information. Contact information is like money to us. You know, we're an influencer organization. Our contact information is money. We shouldn't be giving it away to candidates, but we need to collect it, and we need to make sure that it's accurate and updated. That is one of the biggest values that we provide as a party, is we can touch all the active voters, or a good percentage of them, and we can get their current contact information. So let me show this video that talks about what actually happens at the caucus.
Hi, I'm Kirby Glad, and this is an instructional video about registration for the neighborhood caucus elections, especially using the information from VoterClick. So there are a couple different ways to register at the caucus, and the purpose of that is three things. First of all, we want to make sure that we're collecting contact information for the people who are coming to caucus. These are our party supporters. They're the ones who are the most active. We want to make sure that the party has a way of contacting them later. And we want to give them information about what's going on and about issues that are important in the Republican Party. The second reason is to make sure that we verify voters. So at the caucus, only certain people are allowed to vote. Refer to your precinct rules. Members of the Republican Party are allowed to vote. Members of other parties are not. So we want to make sure that the people who are here are those who are allowed to vote and allowed to participate, or we know who they are if they're not. And then the third reason is so that we have a credential count. So when we are balloting, if we know that there's 200 people who are authorized to vote, and if we get 210 ballots during the meeting, then we know something's wrong and we need to fix it. So having a credential count helps us to make sure that the voting process is fair and lawful. So there are two ways of doing a paper registration. So this is people who have not pre-registered. I'll talk about pre-registration in a moment. They come to the precinct meeting with their photo ID and they're ready to be registered. At a table at the precinct, I've got several stations here with a voter list, a complete voter list of the precinct. Don't try to split one list up, into A's, B's, C's, because no one will know what line to stand in. Make sure that all of your registrars have a complete voter list so that any voter can register at any table position. You should have about one registrar for every 25 people you expect to come to your precinct caucus election. In my caucus, we have about 250 people show up, so we're going to have 8 registrars, and they'll each have their own list, so 8 different lists. Make sure that you have those prepared in advance, and of course, everyone needs a pen. So with the paper registration, I mentioned there's 2 ways of doing the paper registration. The steps are you get someone's name and their ID, you look them up on the list, that takes a little bit of time. You check their contact information. It may already be on the list, or it may not, or it could be wrong. You want to make sure you collect the correct contact information and then have them sign in. So in the case where, here's an example of someone who's going to come up and register. So next, please. Just please give me your name and your ID.
McCall Glad.
McCall Glad, excellent. Okay, what a fine family name you have. All right, let me see, just Glad. Okay, there you are, right? Here, is that you?
Yes.
Okay, would you just please double check your phone number, and is that your correct address?
Yes.
Okay, and then would you, I see that your phone number is missing in your email. Could you fill in your phone number and your email for me, please? What's the tune for Jeopardy? Da, 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 da,
so this is what the sheets look like.
Perfect,
after
thank you. Is that an A or an E right there? Is that
an
A, perfect, okay. All right, and then if you'll just sign right there, that'd be great. All right, and then here is your voter credential. Thank you very much. So let me explain what the voter credential is. Remember that the second purpose is making sure that only people who are supposed to vote and participate are voting and participating. There are many ways to do this, and in several precincts, a voter credential is handed out. So if I know you're a Republican, you get a pink. If I know you're some other party, you get a yellow. And that way I know that pinks are allowed to vote and yellows are not, etc. This can be done by handing out a colored card or a printed voter credential. Some precincts even use wristbands or other methods. You can, if you only have a few people who are not qualified to vote and you can identify them visually, maybe that's one way of doing it, or have them sit in a certain spot. So there are many ways of handling the voter credential issue, whatever is customary in your precinct that does the job. So as you noticed when I had her fill in all of her information here, she was standing at the table for quite some time, and the more time it takes for each person to register, the longer the line is, and part of our process, our purpose is to get the line as short as possible. So here's another way of doing it. Let's say that I have another voter step up to the table, and what is your name, and give me your ID? Austin Booth. All right, let me just find you here. You're under the B's. Excellent. Is this your correct address here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I noticed we don't have your name and phone number here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jot down your voter ID on this card, and I'd ask you to just fill in your name and email address, and I'll pick these up later. All right, thank you, and here's your voter credential. Thank you very much, and your ID, appreciate it. So you see that's much faster, because rather than have him stand in line to fill out the information that I want, the contact information, I'm going to have him go to his seat and do it. On the form, which I'll show you in just a second, there's a number that specifically identifies his voter ID. I write that on the card. Then all I have to do is halfway through the meeting, pick up all the cards, and then I have all the information I need to be entered into the system later. So those are the two methods for paper registration. Now, an even better system than that, in my view, is a mobile application that provides for registration right at the desk. So a person comes up to the table, and I don't even ask for his ID. I just say, sir, would you just please put in your last name, your house number, and your zip code in the application there. So all he has to do is enter his last name, and then tap in his zip code, 5 digits, and then his house number, 3 or 4 digits. And then what it does on the application is it gives him a list of people that match, probably all living at his house. He picks the correct person, and then he's able to register right there. If he needs to change his contact information, he can type it right on the pad. He can enter his phone number, he can put in his email address, and then when he hits enter, it comes up with the information on his voter registration. So all he has to do now is, he shows me the tablet and his ID. All right, you got that all done? Great. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the registration on the pad and see that the name matches. If the name matches, then I know he's a registered voter, because it's going to tell me right on the screen here if he's Republican, unaffiliated, or another party. So the address matches, and then I look to make sure that the picture matches him. Hey, you're a handsome guy. It's my son. And as long as those 3 things match up, he's registered. No looking through forms, no signing, no picking up papers, nothing else. It's all taken care of. So that is the benefit of the electronic registration. The trick is you've got to have pads. Phones will work also, whether if it's an Android or an iPhone, but a little bit harder to type into because they're so small. But if you have 10 people or 5 or however many registrars you will have, and they're volunteer to bring in their Android pad or their iPad, then you can do all your registration right at the table. You don't even have to have the paper, except to do voter registrations if someone wants to register there. There's also the case where someone will come to the table and they want to identify with the Republican Party. You should have some blank voter registration forms. And again, don't have them fill those out at the table. Have them go to another area to fill out the forms. And then when they bring them back, they won't be on the list, of course, because they've only just registered as a Republican. Keep the voter registration and make sure you turn that in with your precinct caucus materials. Now, that covers the paper registration, which, as you can see, takes time. What we want to do during this caucus is to reduce the amount of time that people stand in line. So one of the things that we've developed under the direction of the leadership of the state Republican Party and the state executive committee is an electronic registration system. Part of that system is that people can go online and pre-register. That means that they can go to a website, identify themselves, and print out a registration ticket. Again, the purpose of this is to shorten the time for them to get into the meeting. If someone has a registration ticket, they've already identified themselves, we know what party they're affiliated with, and they don't have to sign in or be looked up on the paper sheets. So let me show you how fast that can go. I'm just going to move this table out of the way, and I'm going to put this chair aside, and I'm going to have a special ID checker that isn't at a table. He's just standing by the door checking IDs, saying something like this. Is there anyone in line who is pre-registered? If you're pre-registered, come right here, please. Yes. Okay, you have a paper registration, okay? And on this paper, what it shows is her name and address and her party affiliation. And may I see your ID, please? I check the address on the ID and the name against what's on the ticket, and then I check the picture against her. It's you. Thank you. Thank you, and here's your voter credential. And here's your ID. Thank you. That's all it is. It's just that fast. No looking up on the paper, no filling out information, because they've already done their contact information online. You can also pre-register on a smartphone. So here's an example of somebody now who has their ticket on the smartphone. Thank you. Can I see your ID, please? Right here. All right. That matches. That matches. Here's your voter credential. Thank you very much. Enjoy the precinct meeting. So you see, that's a much faster way of checking people in. They don't have to sign in. They don't have to fill out forms. And we can get a lot of people in that way. All you need to do is have an ID checker who just brings people in and says, who's pre-registered? Bring your tickets right here, and I'll check you in. So there's one other variation in the registration, and that's if you're using the electronic voting option of VoterClick. But there's a separate video for that. So if you have any questions about that, then you can contact me at the email address shown on your screen.
All right. So go ahead. Questions? Any questions so far? All right. I wanted to give a little bit more detail about the app that
this is Kirby Glad.
Sorry, hang on.
This is Kirby.
Yeah. I wanted to give a little bit more detail about the app that you use to actually do the check-in, so you can see it in a little more detail. I think people might have a question of how easy is it to use, or you know, can you use it if you have bad internet at your school, or a whole variety of questions like that. So let me just play this one, which will answer all those questions. Sorry. Hang on 1 second. Into the right one. Okay, sorry.
Well, this short video will tell you how to use the VoterClick Caucus system. This is especially good for those who are volunteering to assist with the registration at the caucus meeting. So the first thing you need to know is that you should follow the instructions from your party leaders. And I will give you the technical information, but anything about check-in policies or procedures, you should take your instructions from your party leaders as being more important than.
So this is a video that we could actually use to train people who are going to do the check-ins. And so it should be simple enough to explain to volunteers that you have in your precinct and that your precinct chairs have in their precinct. This is the video that we could have them watch in advance of the precinct to learn how to do this process.
Whatever I'm telling you here. But what you should do before the caucus meeting is download the app at least one day before caucus, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. And you are, when we talk about the caucus check-in managers, that's you. You're people who are going to help us check in. Now, when you're at the caucus, you'll need to enter your county information, your precinct. All this information should come from your precinct chair, and there'll be a password that you're going to need. So download the meeting list for offline use in case the internet fails. You have to do this before you leave home, just to make sure you have it on your system. Then when you're at the caucus, you can check in people just by typing in the last 3 letters of their name and their house number. It's very simple and fast. If you don't find the people, we do have a way of double checking with the Lieutenant Governor's website for anyone who has checked in recently or marked their voter record as private. I'll show you how to do that. And if you are doing offline check-ins after the meeting, you have to synchronize on the internet. If you are doing all online check-in, everything will be automatically uploaded during your check-in. So here's how you get the app. It's called VoterClick Caucus. You can find it on Android or on iPhone just by searching in the store. So when you go to the screen, this is what you'll see. And the first thing you want to do is download for offline check-in. Now, just a reminder, you can play around with this like a week or two before the caucus, that's fine. But you'll want to make sure that you do this within a couple days of the caucus. We will have an updated list available, and we will have cleared out all the testing information. So about 2 days ahead of the caucus, do this download for offline check-in. Then you're going to have to enter your county. Hopefully you know that. Your precinct number. You should know that from your precinct chair. And there'll be a password. For testing, you can just use the password check-in. And make sure that you create a username. It can be any username you want. You should put your email and your phone number there. This will only be shared with the precinct chair or other party officers so they can contact you if there's any questions about the check-in that you did. After you proceed, then you'll get this progress bar as it downloads the voter records of your precinct. And once that is completed, it'll say, okay, we've got all the lists downloaded. Now return to the menu. Now you can check in at the caucus meeting. This is for now at the caucus meeting using the internet check-in or the offline check-in. So try the internet check-in. If it's working fine, then it's better to use that. If it's not working and you can't get a signal or there's some technology problem, then use the offline precinct check-in, and you can just upload the information later when you get back to home and you have a signal. So whichever way you use, the internet online or the offline check-in, the first screen you'll get is this one. It's very simple to check people in. You just enter the first few letters of their last name and their house number. So as they come up, you'll be sitting probably at a table. As they come up to the table, say, please show me your ID. And you get their name. You put in a few letters of their name. You get their house number from their address. And then you click on Find, and it'll give you all of the voters that are at that household. So you should be able to select the correct one because you're looking right at the ID already, right? So when you get this page, it tells you if that person is a registered Republican or some other party. So make sure you verify that. If they're Republican, they can participate. If not, then they can't. Also, turn the screen around. You should be doing this on a tablet. That's preferred, not really a phone. It's too small. But just turn the screen around and ask them to update their contact information. We are only going to use the phone number for party purposes, and we're also not going to distribute their email address. So they can be assured that we're not going to give out their contact information, so they're not going to get spammed. If they're a delegate, though, of course, they must be able to be contacted by the candidates. Once you have them complete the contact information, then you're going to click on register and they're done. Now, you must ask them to sign the roster. Every technology can fail, and you must have a paper backup system. So your paper backup for the registration is having them sign the roster. And then if your precinct uses voting credentials, then give them their voting credential. This is the example of the roster that you should use. You're not going to look up their name on a list. That takes too long. That's the whole purpose of this, is to not take so long. We want to get people in the meeting quickly, have them enjoy it, and not have to stand in line. We want to start the meeting on time, so we want to register people quickly. So we're not going to look up their name on a list. That's why we have the app. So you just have the first person sign number 1, the next person sign number 2, and so on. So it just takes about 2 seconds for them to sign their name and put in their name. And you can get this form on the VoterClick.com website. If you log in your account and get under Caucus Tools, the registration mobile app, or ask your precinct chair to provide you with these forms. Once you do that, you'll go back to this screen and you just keep doing it. You just put in the last name and the house number, click Find, you register. You do another one, you register. You do another one, you register. Now, A couple things that might be unusual. First of all, we have something called pre-registration. Pre-registration people have already done something online, so they don't have to stand in line. They don't have to even enter things into your app. Probably you should have another person who's only doing pre-registration people, but if someone who's pre-registered comes to your line, this is what you do. They just will show you a ticket and their ID. You don't need to look them up. You don't need to sign them in. Well, except for, I'll show you here. You just compare the ID to the ticket, and they've already gone online and identified themselves. Now, they may have a paper ticket. If they do, you just keep that as your paper backup. Remember, we always need to have a paper backup. And if the ticket is on the mobile phone, and they just show you their ticket and their ID, then you have them sign the roster, and that's for your paper backup. And, of course, give them voting credential if your precinct is using that. This is what the ticket looks like, whether it is printed out on paper or if it is on the mobile app. This is how it looks. So you should be able to spot it. Now, there's another thing that could happen, which is after you click find, you may get this message. No voters were found in the precinct matching this information. So this means that somebody is not on the list that we received from the state. There could be a couple reasons for this. One is they registered just recently, and we got a list about 2 weeks in advance, or they may have marked their voter record as private, and they won't show up on our list. Now, I suggest that you have a separate table to handle these not found voters, because they may need to fill out a voter registration form, so you don't want to hold up the line. Just have another table for that, and if anybody gets this message, you send them over to the other table, and the other table will click on the bottom of the screen that says add voters, and then the person will be filling this in. You see, it takes a lot more time, so that's why you don't want to do this at every registration line. They have to put this information in, and then the computer system will actually contact the Lieutenant Governor's voter registration database and see if the person is actually currently listed. A message will come up and tell you whether the person is registered and can participate, in which case you have them sign the roster and give them a voting credential. Remember, we always need that paper backup. Or you may be required to have them fill out a voter registration form and sign it, and in that case, that's your paper backup. You don't need any other additional signatures. Now, if you have done offline check-in, you will see something like this. Records downloaded, a number, and then a number of records registered. That's only the records registered on this device. So you will need to click log out, and then click on synchronize offline check-in. And then you will be able to upload everybody that you checked in will upload. So regarding how to test this app, anything you want to do, you can do it until about 4 days before the caucus. Everything that you do will be erased up to 4 days before the caucus, and then it'll be live. So anybody that you check in or any information that you add to the voters, whatever, that will be disregarded once you reach about 4 days before caucus. So after that, consider the system to be live. If you need any additional help, contact support at serendipitous.com. Also on VoterClick.com, there's a live chat, which is mainly for support of the website, but you can ask mobile app questions there.
Okay, so what I've tried to show there is the process for checking in. Again, it accomplishes a couple things. One is it speeds up the line. Number two is it performs the very important purpose of collecting contact information. Now, the other thing that's nice about it is about the app is that you can also enter the results of your election. So you can select from the people who are attending the caucus. You can select the ones who was elected as chair and who are elected as delegates, and that circumvents all of that manual data entry. Because all the information, anybody who registers through the app or who registers through your registration people who are using the tablet, all that data is already entered. You don't have to then go in and have this whole thing that we used to do, which was have a giant data entry party. So this one I'm not going to play because we're at
This short
time,
video will tell
but
you.
I'm going to paste this link in the chat. This is, let's see if I can figure out how to do the chat. It's here. If you want to watch this video, it will show you how to do the voting. Now, to do the voting is a bit more complicated, and if there are some precincts who want to try it out, I'll be happy to work with you. Or if your district, if you want to use the voting, but watch this video first and make sure that you really understand it. And if we're going to use it countywide, we probably should have started in November training at the November Central Committee meeting. Although probably it doesn't matter this year because we're probably going to get all new. There's so many precincts that don't even have leadership now, so that probably wouldn't have mattered. But the voting can really speed things up. But it's not the only way to speed things up. There are other ways to speed things up in the process.
Will that support be available caucus night?
Yes. Yeah. So what we really want, as you can imagine, it's a huge peak loading problem. So here we have a program that's not used hardly any at all for 2 years, and then one night there's 4,000 people that are using it. So what we really want to happen is to get people to try it in advance. That's why we have this test period where people go in, we tell the precinct chairs, look, get your people who are going to register together and just do some experimenting, just practice with it. And we want to get the support calls and everything in days ahead of time, because there's just no way that, that we can answer everybody or, who wants to do it on just that night. So we want to get people trying it and testing it out in advance so they get comfortable with it, that they understand how it works, and we can solve any problems in advance. Now, after the caucus, I'm just going to talk for 2 minutes about it. There are several ways for people who don't use the online check-in, several ways for them to upload the information in a much more convenient way than we had in the past. So as you saw, the check-in sheet has a voter ID number. And one way of entering it in is if all you really have to do is just enter in the voter ID number to recognize the person attended, just because we want to keep track of who our party faithful are. But if you want to update the phone, the telephone number and an email address, you just 10 key in the voter ID, and then you can enter in the phone number and the email address, and then go on to the next one. You can do a whole precinct of 100 changes in an hour, or, well, it depends on your typing speed, but it's very fast. The other thing we have for people who aren't so good at the keyboard is we can actually put up a grid that looks just like the check-in sheet. We can put it up on the screen, and then somebody can click on a thing and then adjust somebody's phone number, or go down here and change somebody's address, and then mark that they were here. They can also mark that they were elected as chair. So that's what Salt Lake County used in their last cycle. Was they didn't all use the online registration, but they all used the check-in sheets, and then they actually had their secretary, because they have a full-time secretary. Just take all the sheets and enter it in. She entered all the sheets for Salt Lake County in 2 days, in 2 work days. So so it really streamlines things. And then, so the whole purpose is that after the caucus, we want to get the candidate, the delegate information to the candidates as soon as possible, because we have the shortened cycle. We've compressed it because of the signatures and all this other kind of stuff, that we've compressed the election cycle. So it's to our advantage to get the delegate information to the candidates as quickly as possible, in days, not a week or 2 weeks or whatever that was done under older systems. So that is the CaucusClick system. It's been an hour, and any questions?